160 acres. Accordingly, it's been announced that 100 acres of land will be given by the government to any settler being a British subject. All you've got to be is British, you get 100 acres guaranteed. So this is to settle Canada. So it's going to attract people. So I'm going to come up with an example here, fairly quick example. And this is somebody that Linda researched. It's Hubert William Kimball, born in Swanbourne in 1889, listed on the 1891 and 1990 census as an agricultural labourer, emigrated to Liscar, Manitoba in 1910, was listed as a railroad labourer on the ship list, so that's the job he must have been doing in England. And then he's listed in Canadian records as a farm labourer in 1910, but by 1916, and this is a single man, is listed in Canadian records as a farmer. So it's quite possible, it seems to me, he was in Manitoba, he went over to Manitoba and he was trying to establish his own farm. Then unfortunately he joined the army in 1917 and he was killed at Vimy Ridge in 1918. And incidentally, he's omitted from the 13 names on the Swanbourne War Memorial. Probably ought to be there, but he's never been there. So that's just an example. Then we've got emigration to the USA. And the pattern is not dissimilar. So number crunching, the figure here is a little bit higher in peak times, so we're going up to about 15 here. Here's the year. Californian gold rush was 1848 to 55. You would expect the Civil War to have a negative impact. It doesn't really seem to have had much of an impact. The 1870 Indian Wars are around about this time. There's not really much happening there. The Alaskan gold rush is in 1880, but when you actually look at where people were going, they weren't going to Alaska, because nobody went to Alaska. So although superficially it looks as though there's correlation, there isn't. Not for the people from Swanbourne. And then in 1878, there's cheap or free farmland in prairie and western states. Most of it was for sale, but it wasn't expensive. So it wasn't given away in the same way as Canada. As long as you were British, you could have at least 100 acres, because obviously they're Americans, so they would sell it to you, basically. So that is the main difference. And then we've got a few periods as we come into the 20th century, a few blips upwards, because we had a boom time period in the USA, and there was a period of full unemployment between about 1900 and about 1915.
I don't, in terms of the detail, are these all from the same family that are going to the same place? Or?
Sometimes what you get are families which go together, and occasionally you get families which follow on after another family. And I've got an example of that in a minute. So, first of all, again, I'm trying to do the same as I did with a map of Canada. The red line here is the border. And obviously you've got the numbers down here. And the highest proportion around here, there's 20, went to Illinois, in particular the Chicago area. So if you try to put a centre of where the largest number of people went, it's immediately south of the Great Lakes in the Chicago area. So the two sites where most people were going were actually not that far from each other, just north of the Great Lakes and just south of the Great Lakes, to the industrial parts of USA, which at this time was still expanding. It also includes some of the Rust Belt as well, which is now called Rust Belt.
You've got 3 Utah there, and
yeah.
I heard there was some Mormon congregations in Bucks in the 1800s.
Yeah.
And then they were all encouraged to emigrate.
Yes.
So I'd be interested if they were Mormons or not. Do you know?
I can't remember just off the top of my head.
Well, that'd be interesting.
But if they've gone to Utah, most likely I think they are. I know within my own tree, there's somebody who is not a direct ancestor, but like a distant cousin, who went to join an uncle who was in Salt Lake City and converted once she was there to Mormonism. So if you went to Utah, the main population site was Salt Lake City. And most people who went there converted to Mormonism. So it's quite likely, I think, quite likely. That's just a quick roundup then of North America. And of course you've got the adverts in a similar way to Canada. Millions of acres, you know, for sale on 10 years credit, this kind of thing, 6% interest. They're basically selling it to you, but it was not expensive. Now, I'm going to mention here the Palmer family, which is actually on the website, so I'm not going to say much about them now, because you can read a bit more on the website. And there's two articles. The first one, in fact, Neil put up. That's from Neil's article. And the other one I put up is about Louise. And the main thing it tells you is, first of all, 1848, Sam and Mary Palmer emigrated to Australia from Swanbourne. At Geelong, they had two children, Sam James Palmer and Charles William Palmer. But they then came back to Swanbourne. So they returned to Swanbourne, and Sam James Palmer rented a house opposite the church and Darrell's farm. So in other words, it's on the other side of the road to Darrell's farm. There's no house there now. There used to be a house there. Okay, but this rented house, which fell into the ownership of the Fremantles, was planned to be pulled down. So that could be a push factor. In 1869, Sam Palmer, with his wife and two sons, emigrated again, this time to Nebraska in the United States of America. The pull factor could have been cheap land in the prairies suited to cereal growing. It may be that where they went in Australia, maybe it was less suited to cereal growing. Maybe that was the kind of farming he was used to. I'm just speculating here. But he in fact went to Australia first, then came back, and then he ended up going to Nebraska. Following on, Louise Palmer from Swanbourne, is the niece of Charles, was left an orphan in 1883. Her parents had died and her brother had died. And basically, her family, she was the only person in her immediate family. So, getting to this point of following relatives, she went to Nebraska to join her two first cousins. Well, she went actually originally to join her uncle, but her uncle died before she got there. And when she got there, the two first cousins were still there. These are the ones that had actually been born in Australia. And so the pull factor here would have been the fact that she already had family there. Palmer family descendants still live in the western states of USA today, and I'm in email contact with them, with the descendants of Louise. I'm in contact with the descendants of Louise. And they've sent on several photos, which are actually in the articles on the website. So, the other one I'd like to mention is the North family. Now, Carl Glaume is a direct descendant of the North family from Swanbourne, and Carl visited Swanbourne in 2014. He turned up actually on, it was Good Friday, wasn't it? It was Good Friday. He kind of turned up with very short notice. And this is from the article on our website again. Through the initial research done by my cousins, we were very happy to confirm that the family's origins in Peterborough, Swanbourne and Chipping Norton. I've grown up hearing that my grandmother was born in Peterborough almost as they boarded the boat to come to the USA, but that the origins of the family were in Swanbourne. Now, it turns out that the Norths at first moved to Peterborough, were there for about 10 years and then they emigrated, and the whole North family, which had kind of originated from Swanbourne, then followed on from Peterborough. So it's kind of in two stages. They moved out of the village, got different types of jobs other than agricultural labouring in Peterborough, but obviously whatever the reason was, they were tempted to go to America, and they did go to America. And this is the descendant of Leonard North, that's Carl, who lived from 1825 to 1892. He was born in Swanbourne and he died in Chicago in Illinois. And what I was able to do when Carl was here, right, this is Petticoat Lane, and Petticoat Lane is the Aylesbury Road. Right here, there's a picture of it, painting of it. What used to be called the poorhouses here, that's the site where it's standing, where the poorhouses used to be. So Petticoat Lane is behind him, behind the hedge. So it's just close to where the stile is. You've got a new bit of pathway coming down the road from Swanbourne House School. You cross over, there's kind of a stile, And then you look down and there's a flat platform, and that flat platform is the site for these cottages, and that's where his ancestors lived. He also had ancestors that lived in the Aylesbury Road as well. But
Northfield Farm, is it?
Sorry?
Northfield Farm, do they live?
North Hill Farm is not in his direct line, but it was one of his cousins lived there. Yes, one of the cousins of Leonard North. So North Hill Farm is named after North family. That's correct, which is where Claire Barker lives. So it was really interesting, and he'd done a lot of work on his family tree, and we've got an article from him on the website if you want to read that in more detail. So that gives another good example. So without any more ado, let's get to the main point: emigration to Australia. So as far as emigration to Australia is concerned, we had numbers which were much greater, as I started to say, and it started earlier.